Hello, I'm Philip Foster, and I'm the author of a book called While the Earth Endures, Creation, Cosmology and Climate Change. This is a book about, as you may imagine, climate and all that supposedly we are told is happening, supposedly being caused by human beings. Now, the truth of the matter is that scientifically speaking, there is no basis for this idea. Human beings do not influence the climate except on a very micro scale. For example, we're sitting in London, and the temperature in London is likely to be a degree or two warmer than it may be in the countryside. That's particularly true during winter time. This is known as the urban heat island effect, but it is small and easily dissipated. One of the main contentions of the global warmists, or the climate changeists, or the alarmists, if you like, is this theory that carbon dioxide supposedly can affect the temperature, and that by pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, human beings are therefore warming the global climate. Now, it may be quite reassuring for you to hear that there is not a shred of scientific evidence to support this contention. In fact, carbon dioxide cannot possibly warm the atmosphere. There is so little of it to start with, and secondly, even if it was more of it around, it still would not warm the atmosphere. If anything, it slightly cools it. We need to go back in time. Most of you have heard of what is called the greenhouse effect. Most of you have experienced a greenhouse effect, so-called, when you climb into your car, which you've parked in the sun. As you know, the car inside is boiling hot. The dashboard and the seats are often too hot to touch. This is due to the sun's radiation coming through the glass of the car, warming the seats, warming the dashboard, which are usually quite dark in colour, and heating the air inside the car by conduction and convection. And that's, roughly speaking, how a greenhouse works out in your garden. That's why it's warmer than the outside air. Very simply, because there is a glass roof, the heated air cannot escape. If you open windows and doors, the greenhouse will soon cool down. However, in 1824, a mathematician, French mathematician called Fourier, thought he had a theory as to how a greenhouse became warmed. And the theory was that glass absorbs infrared, which is heat energy from the sun, but also absorbs heat energy radiated from the ground of the greenhouse, which it then re-radiates back into the greenhouse and stoking up the heat. That was his theory to explain why a greenhouse got warm. And this theory was believed until 1909, another bit of history. A Professor Robert Wood, later to become famous for inventing infrared photography and a number of other important aspects of infrared work, in 1909 published a short paper about the greenhouse effect. In it, he simply stated, first of all, that he was doubtful that back radiation from the greenhouse had any effect on warming the air inside the greenhouse. Instead, he thought it was purely conduction and convection. To test this, he did a very simple experiment, and this experiment could be conducted in any high school anywhere in the world today. He made two small cardboard boxes, painted them black, placed on the lid of one, across the top, a glass plate, and across the other one, in 1909, he used a rock salt crystal plate. Same as glass, only it did not absorb infrared. He placed both these boxes out into the sun, put a thermometer in each one, and watched which box got warmer. Strangely, the rock salt crystal box warmed quicker than the glass box, showing that the lack of absorbing infrared actually helped to warm the ground, which warmed the air inside the box. This simple experiment showed beyond all doubt that an infrared absorbing glass does not warm the greenhouse. In fact, if anything, it slightly cooled it or made it less hot. So the idea that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas warming the atmosphere is simply wrong. It is a mistake right at the root of the whole colossal edifice of the so-called global warming effect. Neither water vapor nor carbon dioxide re-radiate infrared. They cannot do so to any effect. The IPCC claims it does. The IPCC cannot do simple mathematics. If you look at any of their diagrams of what goes on in the atmosphere, you can pull them off the internet anytime and add up. You will discover that according to them, the Earth receives some 200 or 300 watts per square metre from the sun and manages to radiate 450 watts back out. Energy from nowhere. It's nonsense. Complete nonsense. The greenhouse effect does not happen. The atmosphere is not kept warm by so-called greenhouse gases. There are other factors, too complicated to explain now, but it's certainly nothing to do with human emissions of carbon dioxide. And in this connection, people worry about levels of carbon dioxide, which are currently at 380 parts per million. In fact, if you look at Big Ben, the height of Big Ben, right to the top, if you can swing round and have a look, right to the top, before you get to the little cross at the top, is the content of the atmosphere excluding carbon dioxide. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is just a tiny, tiny little nick at the top. That's all there is. In fact, the level of carbon dioxide currently in the atmosphere today is at its lowest level for 300 million years. It has never been this low. In many ways, we are at starvation levels of carbon dioxide. A little increase in a tiny amount may seem alarming, but it is tiny and greatly to be welcomed. The more CO2 we have, the better, because it makes the plants grow, and that means there's more food, and that means the population of the world is going to be less likely to starve. More CO2 is a good thing. Carbon dioxide has no downside whatsoever. It does not warm the atmosphere, it makes the plants grow, and all of us are totally dependent upon it. If we were to cut carbon dioxide by half the amount, all plants would die, and so would we. Think upon that. The global warmists are plain wrong. They know no science, and they need to go back to school to do simple thermodynamics. Just to say again about the book, While the Earth Endures, by Philip Foster, that's my good self, with a foreword by Professor David Bellamy, the well-known naturalist. It's available on Amazon, just key it in and it should come up, and you should be able to purchase a copy. Thank you very much.